Welcome, everyone, to another edition of CPG Insiders. I'm your host, Mark Young, co-host Justin Girouard. Justin, you're a little under the weather today, so if people notice you're kind of coughing a little bit, we're going to apologize for that in advance.
Yeah, sorry. Apologize in advance if you hear anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I do
All
have
right.
my sexy radio voice because I'm sick. So
We just got to get really close to the microphone.
real close to the mic.
See, there you go. That's how you do smooth jazz. Just like that. See? That's all there is to being the smooth jazz DJs. You just have to talk with your lips against the microphone.
If I only knew earlier in my career where I could be now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You could have been doing smooth jazz.
I know. Like what? Oh gosh, Yeah, you got to live with some regrets.
It is true. It is true. But hey, there's always time.
There's always time.
Anyways, you can start an internet smooth jazz radio show. But let's talk about something else that's not so smooth, but something that you need to do.
Amen.
We're going to talk about channel strategy. And I'm going to tell you what we mean by this, folks. If your goal is to put your product into brick and mortar retailers, which is the place to be if you want to speak to 80% of America,
Yes.
because it is where all the action is,
Mm-hmm.
it is important for you to know in advance what your channel strategy is.
So let's just real basic. What are you talking about when you say channel strategy?
So for me, it's two things. One, or three things, actually. The first one is for me to create my list of the appropriate retailers for me to be in.
Yep.
So what's my dream team of retailers?
Yep.
Because very few products belong in every retailer. If you're selling bottled water,
Right.
you probably fit in every retailer.
Right. And if you're a previous listener of the show, or maybe you're new here, one of the terms we use all the time is ACV. We constantly are talking about ACV, all commodities volume, right? And that's exactly what Mark's talking about here. What all commodities volume stands for is here are all the potential retail stores that this type of product is sold at. That would equal 100% ACV, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, so it doesn't mean every retailer in the country. It means every retailer that sells this type of product or this category. That's what
Right.
ACV stands for.
So if we were selling bottled water can be sold any place because Neiman Marcus can sell bottled water.
Absolutely.
And Target can sell bottled water. And Walgreens can sell bottled water. And Tractor Supply sells bottled water.
Exactly.
So, but if you're not selling bottled water, chances are, and really bottled water probably is the most universal product I can think of.
That's the most I can think of. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're not selling bottled water, then you probably don't belong in every store.
Yep.
So as an example, you and I are working with a client who has a product that is a companion product for produce.
Yes.
That cleans produce. Doesn't belong at Tractor Supply, doesn't belong probably at Walgreens and CVS.
Right.
Because they don't sell produce.
Nope. But every grocery store in the country, absolutely. It should be there.
So it belongs in a Walgreens, belongs in a Target, belongs at Kroger, belongs at Albertsons, Publix,
Yep.
H-E-B, Meijer. But it doesn't belong every place.
Exactly.
But then there are other products who don't belong in grocery.
Yep.
So the first thing we have to do is decide what are the stores we belong in.
Yep.
And I want to see us break those stores into two groups.
Okay.
What I'm going to call regional and national. So
Yep.
what are my regional stores that I belong in? Do I belong in Meijer? Do I belong in Publix? Do I belong in H-E-B? What are the nationals that I belong in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, we also have to look at there are different categories of retailers. So when we think of the categories, we start off with what we call food, drug, mass, what we call FDM.
Yep.
So are you food, drug, mass? Are you all of the above? Now there's another category or other categories. And those categories are what we call C stores.
Mm-hmm.
That's your 7-Elevens and your Speedway and your Wawas. There are what we call specialty So specialty is Lowe's, specialty
Yeah.
is Home Depot, specialties is Advanced Auto Parts.
Right. Or GNC, Vitamin Shop, whatever the
Right.
case may be.
These are
Yep.
specialties.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have club stores.
Yep. Oh man, the club stores.
And that's a different category of business.
It is. It is a whole different world.
And not only do you need to come up with what are the stores you belong in, you need to come up with what is the cadence for you to get into those stores. Which stores am I going to go after first?
Mm-hmm.
And which ones make sense?
Yep.
So as an example, Walmart will rarely be the first store to bring the product in. It happens once in a while, but it's pretty rare
Yes.
for Walmart to be a first mover.
Mm-hmm.
But when we think about let me back up for a minute. Let's talk about how to decide where your product fits. So
Yep.
we need to look at your product as envision right now that you're looking at a big funnel.
Mm-hmm.
At the very top of the funnel is bottled water.
Right.
So it's as ubiquitous as it can be. It goes every place. I can sell it everywhere. The further down the funnel we go, the more narrow the focus or the more specialty the category.
Yeah.
So if I'm selling pain reliever, I'm selling aspirin, it's pretty close to the top of the funnel.
Yeah.
It fits in food, it fits in drug, it fits in mass.
Yep.
It could even fit in convenience if I sell it in little 2-packs.
It could fit in pretty much any one of them, really.
Yeah. It'll fit in most of them. I could do bulk packs and make it work in club stores.
Right.
Maybe it's a convenience item at a specialty, like a Home Depot or a Lowe's.
Right.
So work your way down the funnel. So as we come down the funnel, we start to think of, okay, so what's our product? So let's say that our product is, let's say it's something for feminine health.
Okay.
Okay, so we just took half the country out of the market, right?
Yeah.
Or it's male grooming, either one. We just took half the country out of the market.
Right.
Okay, so what stores appeal to men? What stores appeal to women?
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it grooming? Okay, where do men buy grooming supplies?
Right. Which is going to be, you could, almost all the FDM is an option. Right.
Now, what's the price of your male grooming supply?
And now you're changing the conversation a little bit.
So let's assume for a minute that your male grooming supply is a
Bless you.
$35 item.
Yeah. So you're really premium.
Okay, so if you have a $35, let's call it a $35 shave cream.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? You're not in mass.
Mm-mm. Price point won't work.
So you're not going to be in Walmart.
Mm-mm.
You might fit some targets.
Maybe.
Not all of them.
Maybe.
You might fit some targets. You might fit some drug.
Maybe.
But you're probably more focused on Ulta.
Yeah, you're going specialty here. Your Ulta, your Sephora, you salons,
Right.
maybe something, like a Nordstrom's potentially, something that's more
Nordstrom's,
luxury,
Neiman Marcus,
Right.
Saks Fifth Avenue.
Right.
Because they all have high-end men's counters.
Exactly.
So, and that's the other chain is department
Yep.
stores. So you might fit in those stores. But let's say that you're a $7 shave cream.
Now you're a mass product.
Right, but now you don't belong in Nordstrom's
Mm-mm.
and Saks Fifth Avenue and Ulta and those stores. You don't fit there.
Right. Right.
So everything doesn't fit every place.
Nope.
The same thing goes with when we look at the specialty models of, let's say you make a home improvement product or you make a specialty item. Okay, so do you belong in Advanced Auto Parts? Do you belong over here at Home Depot? But even in those categories can be really tricky because those categories let me back up on why those categories are challenging. They're challenging because, let's say you make a single item for painting edges.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a product for this years ago. So it was painting, being able to paint the corner of a ceiling without having to tape it.
Yep.
Okay. Great item. Great TV item.
Oh, yeah. Demonstrable.
But when you put it into, let's say, Home Depot, you've got one SKU, and you've got brands that specialize in paintbrushes that have 150 SKUs in that store.
Unless you're heavily promoting, you're getting lost.
That's the point. The point is, if you're a one-off specialty,
Yeah.
you're going to need some big pent-up demand to be able to survive in like a Home Depot or a Lowe's store.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get buried in a sea of paintbrushes.
Yeah.
So now you can't expect people are going to find the product. You have to go looking for the product.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Now let's talk about, we've talked about what kind of stores. Let's talk about the cadence of what stores I should start with.
This is an interesting conversation. And this is actually the more difficult one, right? Because what we just talked about, I'm hoping that was very informational, but a lot of that you can kind of work through just by walking around stores and doing some math there. Which we always recommend. Every single brand owner, if you're trying to get into retail, don't just come up with the list of stores you think you belong. Go walk the store. Go into the set that you believe, the aisle that you should belong into, and just see what it looks like. See the products, get a feel for it. This is going to really help answer a lot of, this next step as well. But when you're thinking about the cadence, and so Mark, I wrote down here a few of what I would call the factors to consider when you're trying to think about the cadence of acquisition. So, and we can walk through each one of these, or you tear them apart how you want to. So we've already kind of talked about your product positioning, right? We can go deeper into that. But what's your product? And we already kind of talked about your product category, which we'll dig a little deeper, but product category and performance come into play.
Yeah, we're going to get to that group last.
So the other elements that you need to consider are going to be, one, what is your current capital and cash flow? So you have to consider what the investment requirements are going to be. Depending on the retailer, those are going to be different. So what is your business ready to handle and maintain? Two, what's your manufacturing capacity currently? How much product can you make? Because the last thing you want to do is get an order from a retailer and not be able to fulfill it. So what is your current manufacturing capacity? What can you handle, and how can that be scaled up? You need to understand, what is your company vision and long-term goals? Okay. The way you go about building your acquisition cadence is going to be very different for a company who says, look, I want to sell this company in 3 years. I'm going to be out, versus a company that says, well, I'm building this long term, so I want to give this to my kids. Okay, so how aggressively you go about it is going to be slightly different depending on what the vision and the goals are. And you've got also your current marketing and advertising strategy. What are you currently doing, and what do you build to be able to sustain to support whatever retailers you may get? And last but not least is retail initiatives. So what are the retailers' current initiatives? What are the buyer initiatives? And which ones do you align with, both from a brand and product perspective? Because as we talked about before, to gain retail distribution, you need to be solving the retail buyer's problems. So what are the current problems, the current pressures or initiatives that are happening in each one of these retailers that you may be uniquely able to solve and support? So
when you think about these different retailers, mass retailers are exactly what they sound like.
Yes.
They look for products that the masses buy.
Mm-hmm.
Specialty is exactly what they sound like. When we think about regionals have different goals.
Yes.
So when I'm a regional, when I'm Meijer, and I have 250 stores, 250 Walmart-sized stores, which certainly makes me a big company, I'm not Walmart with 4,600 stores in the U.S. and 10,000 around the world. So I don't have Walmart's buying power.
Mm-mm.
So what I depend on is unique products.
Yes.
So I'm a little more prone to bring something in that's earlier in its life cycle if it has promotion, because now I have something Walmart doesn't have.
Right, right. I will never be able to beat Walmart on price. I can't.
Right. But if I have something they don't have, no one can compare me to Walmart in
Right. So I have
price.
to beat them on selection.
Correct. So
Yep.
this is where regionals start to make sense as a
Hmm.
product launch.
Yes.
But regionals are going to be much more expensive to market. They're going to be more expensive
Right.
to advertise.
Right. Now they will be less expensive when we talked about the the manufacturing potential issues. There won't be as many, obviously, because supporting 250 locations is very different than supporting 4,000. So you're going to have less strain on your manufacturing, and from the capital investment standpoint, again, it's going to be less than if you're trying to support 4,000 Walmarts. But to your point, from that concept of break even or even profitability from an advertising perspective, regionals are a lot more expensive. So you go into a regional support knowing I'm not going to even come close to breaking even. This is all about turning units and I will be burning cash. That's
It's an
going to
audition.
happen. Right. It's going to happen.
It's an audition to prove that you belong in the big world.
100%. 100%.
So when we look at these things, when we look at advertising, I'm going to jump to advertising for a minute. The bigger the piece of geography we buy, the less we pay to talk to 1,000 people.
More efficient it will be. Yes.
So if we have to run ads on Meta, Facebook, Instagram, we can spend anywhere from $40 to $100 to talk to 1,000 people.
For CPMs, easily. Easily.
When we run Fox News, we can talk to 1,000 people for under $3.
Right, when we're on television. If we're on radio, we can get it for around $1.
Right. Now that's national radio, not local radio.
Exactly.
But if we go to local radio, we're looking at $20 to $50 per thousand.
Mm-hmm.
So if I buy Meyer,
Mm-hmm.
that gives me Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. And it's only part, and a little bit of Kentucky, northern Kentucky. So I get some of Ohio, a little bit of Kentucky, some of Illinois, all of Michigan.
Yep.
I could go and buy all those TV stations in those areas and all those radio stations in those areas. But guess what? My budget will look like I'm running a national campaign if I
Yeah.
try to do that.
Because it's so inefficient. So inefficient.
So what happens is, here's what you have to keep in mind. When I run an ad on Fox News nationally,
Mm-hmm.
it will lift the sales at Walmart.
Yes.
But the same dollar will lift the sale at Walgreens
Exactly.
and at CVS and
Mhm.
at Kroger and at Target. And it will also lift the sales at the Meijer.
Yeah. Because people, we are creatures of habit. There are certain stores that we shop and we only shop there. So therefore, that's why you have to get as many stores as possible so your advertising can get to all of these individuals and get them to convert. So I only shop at Meijer or whatever.
So when I have all those stores, the rising tide lifts all the boats.
Exactly.
But if I only have one of them,
Then I'm missing out on the rest of the market.
right, I don't have a rising tide lifting all the boats anymore. I'm trying to hoist the boat out of the water.
Right. Right. Now you must understand that, as Mark talked about a little bit earlier, most likely, again, there's no absolutes in any business, but most likely you're going to get one retailer to say yes to your product, and then everyone else will wait.
If
There
you
are
follow the
exceptions.
26 rules of
Exactly.
retail.
There are always, just different exceptions and scenarios, so there's nothing absolute, but plan on only getting one retailer to say yes, and the rest are going to wait to see how you perform, because that mitigates the risk for every other retailer, because now the other guy's taking the risk, right? So that's what's most likely going to happen here. So that's what Mark's talking about. If you start with a Meijer, there's going to be a lot less constraint on manufacturing and those types of costs, but your advertising efficiencies are going to go through the roof because now you're paying $40, $50, $60 CPMs for whatever you're doing, whether it's Meta, CTV, you name it, as opposed to $1 to $5 CPMs. So the reach is so limited that it's going to be less efficient. So there's still going to be some burn.
Right. Now, let's talk about the startup order.
Yep.
A startup order for Meijer, let's say they take 3 pieces per store.
Yep.
That's 750 pieces of product.
Yep.
Probably another 400 to 750 pieces in the DCs.
Yes.
So 1,000 to 1,500 pieces of product.
Yes.
Okay, now let's do that same scenario with Walgreens.
Now you've got
8,000 stores times
right.
3 pieces. So now we're looking at a 24,000 piece startup order with another 10 to 24,000 pieces in the DCs.
Exactly.
So my first day at Walgreens is 35 to 50,000 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
My first day at Meijer is 500 to, or 750 to 1,200 pieces.
Right. So that
and Walmart's going to make me wait 120 days to get paid and probably pay me on scan.
And most are going to make you pay on scan. I don't care who you are. Now,
so that means you'd never get paid until that product passes through a scanner.
Exactly. So the other element that we haven't talked about here, we talked a little bit about advertising, but since we're talking about cost, is retail media, right? There are going to be pressures. The larger retailer you go to, the larger the pressure is to purchase retail media. Walmart is pressuring every brand to be purchasing retail media. So they're Walmart Plus and all those things because it's actually where they're getting revenue growth. But there are everything that I have read and I've seen in all the stats, nobody's making money on that. The brands are not making money. Okay. So you also have to understand that the larger retailers you go to, you have to account for the investment that they're going to make you put into these trade programs, different BOGOs, depending on that, or retail media. So you have to factor that in as well.
Now, if you've made out your list of retailers, you've made out your list of how you're going to get in, or not how you're going to get into, but the order in which you want to get into them. Now let's go inside the store.
Mm-hmm.
Because now we have to decide, where in the store do you belong?
Yes.
This is not as always a cut and dried answer as you might think it is. So let's say you make our client Derman makes a bruise formula, topical bruise formula.
Yep.
We had debates between, did it belong in skincare, did it belong in first aid?
Yep.
Because it's a daily body lotion, but it also has an indication for bruising, and they're not likely to let you have 2 spots in the store.
No, those buyers don't want to be competing with each other for the same sale.
Right. So you have to figure out, where in the store do I belong? And again, it's not as cut and dried as you think.
No. And that's what we talked about a little bit earlier, which is when you made the list of retailers that you want to go to, and you even determine kind of, okay, here's kind of what I believe the cadence will be. Walk the floor. Take one of your products with you, right? Go to the shelf spaces. Go to the different places you think it could be, and get a sense for what's there. Get a sense for the types of products. Get a sense for the price points that are there. Look at the shelf and see what's turning, what's not turning. You don't have to have access to large data like IRI to be able to get a sense of performance even in your local area, to get a good idea of where should I be that I think that I will perform the best, that I have the best shot of sales. And also, okay, now looking at this shelf, who do I think I could kick out of here and why?
Right, because the buyer's going to ask you who you're replacing.
Exactly. Because they have to replace somebody if they're going to take you on. So you better be able to answer that question.
I just had a conversation with some of our broker colleagues about a product we're working on, which is a makeup brush cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversation we had is, where do we tell them it goes in the store?
Yeah.
Because we're like, okay, does it go next to the makeup brushes? Does it go next to nail polish remover?
Right.
Does it go next to makeup? Does it go by the acne products? Just think about how many places that product could sit.
Absolutely.
And then we have to figure out, where's their shelf space in that area.
For the size of the product. That makes sense.
Correct. But that one's a confusing one, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. And it could be And the issue that you run into that we've seen, right, with some other products, is it may make sense in different sets for different retailers.
Right. It could very easily sit next to facial cleansers,
Right,
but it could also sit next to makeup brushes.
right. And so if you just keep that conversation simply to just, well, in CVS, it really makes sense to sit next to the facial cleansers because as we get more traffic. But if you went to Sephora, it's actually make whatever the case. If you do this specific channel category strategy, the problem you're going to run into is in your advertising, because now it's in multiple places and multiple retailers, and so.
Yeah.
Where do you tell the shopper to go buy it? You can't have an ad that says, so I'm going to show you the 70 list of different shelf spaces for different retailers at the end of my commercial. So wherever you go, you'll be able to find it.
Right.
That'll
So we
be an
can't
issue.
say, look for it in the makeup brush aisle if
Right.
we all of a sudden put it with the facial cleansers.
Exactly.
So what we have to do is we have to look at each of these planograms, figure out which of these planograms, there's a couple of questions. One, which one has a vulnerable product?
Yeah.
And two, which one gets the most traffic per month? So on the surface, let's say we look at facial cleansers, we look at makeup brushes, and let's look at makeup.
Yeah.
Okay. So chances are makeup brushes probably get the fewest visits per year,
I would guess.
because most women probably don't need a new makeup brush every month.
Mm-mm.
But how often does she replenish her facial cleanser?
Right.
And how often does she replace the makeup?
Right.
So now we got to figure out, okay, is where is she visiting? And now, where is her brain
When she's there.
when she's there? What type of thought pattern is her head in?
Right.
So when she's looking at makeup, she's thinking about beauty.
Mm-hmm.
When she's looking at facial cleansers, she could be thinking about anti-aging, but she could also be thinking about bacteria and skin problems and acne and contact dermatitis.
Right.
So maybe her brain is going to be more susceptible to a brush cleaner that kills 99.9% of bacteria.
Right.
Then she's looking at a new eyeliner.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as I said, we have to figure out, how do we knock somebody off the shelf?
Right. Right. So this is, when you initially talk about it, it's like, oh, well, this is simple. No, it's not.
No, it's really not that simple. I would tell you, in our new upcoming book, the 26 Rule Book,
Yep.
I actually break this down in writing,
Nice.
because it's really a complicated issue.
It's very complicated. Well, and as you talk about, when you're talking about the set itself, the other thing is when we talked about every retailer has different initiatives that are coming into play that could also help solve this. So if the retailers are really pushing American-made products, or they're really pushing sustainable packaging, or whatever the case may be, right? And not only is that, and you fit one of these things, so it could make it so that your conversation with the retail buyer is simple, because you're saying, hey, I know you guys are trying to push this and I fit this bill, but also when you're on shelf, if it's something they're pushing, it's going to draw more attention to you, which may draw more attention to the shelf that you're on, which may actually change the type of traffic that it traditionally gets versus when you're there.
I want people to think of one other thing. The product you make is only the beginning of identifying the store, the channel, and the demographic.
Yes.
And here's the example I'm going to give you. I'm going to use wristwatches.
Mm-hmm.
There are wristwatches at Walmart for $3.
Right.
And what do? They tell time. And then there are Timex watches and Casio watches for $30.
Mm-hmm.
They tell time. And then there is Apple Watches for $300.
Right.
And they tell time and do some other cool things.
Right.
Okay. So someone who can afford an Apple Watch can also afford a Timex watch, but is not necessarily the same customer.
Mm-hmm.
But now, let's say that person decides they want to be a little flashier and they say, I want to buy a Tag Heuer watch.
Right.
So now they're shopping Movado or Tag Heuer and they're now buying a $3,000 watch. That person can still afford a Timex. The Timex person can't necessarily afford the $3,000 Tag Heuer.
Mm-hmm.
But what if they decide they want to have a Breitling or a Rolex?
Oof.
So now they're shopping $10,000 to $30,000. And it just tells time
Right.
and does much less than the $300 Apple Watch.
Yep.
Okay, but what if our person doesn't want to have a Breitling or a Rolex and decides they want to have a Richard Mille,
Mm-hmm.
which start at $300,000? Again, the $300,000 guy can afford a Timex.
Right.
And he is solving
The same problem.
the same problem, but is he?
It's not the same desire. It's
Right.
not the same.
Is he solving the same problem?
Right.
So we look at the guy who buys the Richard Mille. Now, he's buying a watch that most people who see it on his arm won't even know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
One, he's probably buying it because he has an affiliation. Two, probably likes the design. Is clearly a watch fanatic,
Right.
a watch collector.
Right.
It's like Sylvester Stallone has a whole group of Richard Milles.
It's aggressive.
And I love hearing Sylvester Stallone talk about his Richard Milles because he goes, well, when I bought this one, I called Richard and told him what I wanted. So he just calls Richard Mille and says, get me one of these. And yes, it's $2 million, no problem. Send it to my house.
Right.
But he's now buying and wearing a watch for pride of ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And because the people who will know what the watch is are the people he cares knows who the watch is made by.
Right.
As simple as that.
Right.
So just because you make a watch doesn't mean it fits in every store and it fits every customer.
Well, that's a fantastic point. Is demographic is key. Target demographic is key. Understanding who your customer is vital to not only identifying the right retailers you belong in, to identifying the acquisition cadence that we discussed before, but also when we're talking about getting the retailers to say yes to you. If you don't understand your customer completely, therefore you can either tell them how A, it aligns with their current customer, which is why you're going to sell a lot of product together, or B, I'm going to be getting you a new type of customer that you don't already have, therefore I'm bringing you new dollars. You're dead in the water. And so if you, it can be very basic for if you're a very regional brand and you say, hey, I'm a regional brand and I'm in Michigan. And so being in Meyer makes sense because look at all these, I'm Michigan made and and Michigan is a very prideful state, yada, yada. Okay, got it. Cool. That's very simple, right? But still worth it, but very simple. But let's go further. As you talked about before, Mark, if I've got a premium product and I'm going to be trying to pitch it into mass, I better be able to show how the mass audience is still going to purchase my product, either currently or will, based on a new strategy. You have to understand your customer.
Now, I want to say, do people wearing Breitlings and Rolexes go to Walmart? Yes.
Of course.
Yeah. And people wearing Richard Milles go to a Walmart.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't try to sell a Breitling or a Rolex or a Richard Mille in a Walmart.
No.
Because the percentage of people who shop there who can afford that makes no sense.
Getting back to the funnel that you described earlier.
Correct.
Yes.
So where would you sell? And those are probably not the best examples because
that's Breitling,
Rolex, and Richard Mille all sell through exclusive stores.
Yeah.
But things of that nature
sure
would belong at Saks Fifth Avenue, at Neiman Marcus, at Nordstrom's, and not belong at Target and not belong at Walmart.
No, you're not going to buy a Chanel watch at Target. It's not going to
Right.
happen.
But you can buy Gucci handbags at Saks
Yeah,
and Neiman Marcus and those stores.
absolutely.
But you're not going to buy a Gucci handbag at a Walmart store.
Nope, not at all.
So it's on you to figure out where you go, in what order you go there, and where inside that store you belong.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And
the bottom line on all of this.
and every piece of it, right?
And who
And
are you replacing?
who are you replacing? At what rate are you going to be replacing things? And as we talk about in other shows, but understand that if you are just getting into retail, to get to what we call 70% ACV or all commodities volume, again, getting back to the beginning of the show, meaning that your product is on shelf in 70% of all retailers that have that product category in their stores it's available. That journey is minimum 3 years traditionally. To get from 0 to 70 is about a 3-year process.
Yeah, 2
This
to
is
3
going
years.
to take
2's
time.
pretty fast. 2's seen
Right.
it done in 2, but that's a pretty hot product.
It's pretty fast. And that's if everything goes right. That's if everything goes right. That means that every time you've launched in a retailer, you won, you've got great brokers, you've got your scaling strategies, manufacturing, all these other things, right? It's a 3-year process. So this is going to take time, okay? And the one thing that we always talk about is the worst thing you could possibly do is try to rush this. The worst thing you can possibly do is try to get into a retailer that your business or your brand is not ready for and
Man,
fail.
I see so many brands get ruined by getting into retail too soon.
They get bad contracts where they're taking on slotting fees and trade programs and all these
Or
things.
worse yet, they don't get a turn rate and they get kicked out, and then
Exactly.
everybody says they're a typhoid Mary and nobody wants to touch them.
Right. And it could be because they didn't have the advertising strategy ready or they didn't have the capital to support all these things. So this is why we're doing this show, and we want to bring this to everyone, is to understand all of the factors that go into trying to build this strategy. And this strategy is a very complex formula to figure out, which is also why we highly, highly recommend get the right who's, okay? Understand, get the right team, the right advertising team that knows the space. Get the right broker team that can advise you correctly on what the right retailers are and where they're going and how to position your product. Don't take all this on yourself. What you need to understand if you're a brand owner or marketer is, okay, these are all the things that I need to pay attention to. But go find the team that knows these things.
And getting on the shelf is not the end of the effort. It's the beginning of the effort.
Yes.
So I'll tell you what I liken this to, Justin. So years ago, I was really big when I was young into martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to martial arts and you go to karate classes, taekwondo, wherever you're going, and you go through a series of belts.
Yep.
You get a yellow belt, and then you get a purple and a green and a blue and a red, and then you get a black belt. And when you get the black belt, your black belt is a first dan or first degree. What most people don't realize when they start in martial arts is the first degree black belt is the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
All those color belts underneath was just prep to keep you motivated.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I had master instructors from Korea. In Korea, they didn't even have all those other belts. They had a white belt and a black belt, and then
That was it.
You went from white belt to black belt. Here in the U.S., we just use these color belts to keep people motivated.
Yep.
Oh, look, you got a purple one. Oh, look, you got a yellow one.
Right.
And we do that to keep people motivated. This is very much like that,
Mm-hmm.
where you've got a ton of prep to do. And then that first day you hit the shelf, that's your first degree black belt. And now you need to become a 10th degree black belt.
Right.
So It's really the beginning of the learning and the beginning of the real marketing.
Right. We always talk about when you're looking at your business from a macro perspective, you've got your beginning and your e-commerce and you're down here, right? So then you get your first retailer, but then all of a sudden in that year 3 we talk about, when you've got 70% ACV, it's a hockey stick, right?
Yeah,
Your
it's
growth
always
is
it's
just going to-
exponential, not incremental.
Exactly. But you need to make sure you're doing all the prep here so that you're ready for that exponential growth, or it will never happen.
Absolutely. If you want to have a flawless paint job on your car, it's about the prep work, not about the paint job.
Right. And so
the paint job's only going to be as good as the prep work you did below it.
Absolutely. So knowing your business, your product, your brand, your customer inside and out, and then building the proper team, finding the proper team that knows how to answer all these questions. If you do that, and obviously we got a new book coming out following all those rules, you can't fail. It's impossible.
So here's the last thing I'm going to say. Getting on the shelf and hoping people buy you is not a strategy.
Hope is not a strategy.
Right.
It's not.
So if you get on the shelf and say, well, I made it on the Meijer shelf, enough people will pick me up. No, they won't.
Mm-mm.
Now, is there a rare occasion where they will? Yeah. I'll give you an example. You made hand sanitizer during COVID.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes. People bought your product because they were just buying whatever they get their hands on.
Mm-hmm.
That is a lightning in a bottle, rare occasion that rarely happens.
Yeah, that's not repeatable.
Correct. So don't count on luck.
Mm-mm.
Count on doing the hard work and being prepared properly.
Right.
That's it for today, folks. If you like today's show, make sure you go to wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. If you're not subscribing, hit the little subscribe button, and then you'll get every episode. Don't forget, you can always get in touch with Justin or I. You can go to jekyllhydelabs.com. You can go to cpginsiders.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll remind people that we now have the virtual mark on the websites.
It is available if you want to ask them any questions.
So you can go to virtual mark and you can actually type in a question or talk to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it will answer you back as me. And it's not bad. It's not perfect.
Well, nothing's perfect.
It's getting better.
It's absolutely getting better, but it's pretty good. I mean, you're gonna get some good information, and obviously, if you go through working with Virtual Mark and you still have any other questions or you weren't really sure about the response, reach out to us. We are always happy to spend time.
You can still get to real mark.
Exactly.
But virtual mark's kind of fun though, because it has everything I've written and all the podcasts and white papers and everything is all in there.
Mm-hmm.
So you can ask it a lot of basic questions and get a pretty good response from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So try it out. And if you do try it out, let us know how you like it. All right, Justin, that's it for this week.
All right.
We'll
Take
see
care.
everybody on the next episode. If you're looking to greatly increase sales on your CPG product, don't hesitate to contact us at Jekyll & Hyde Advertising and Marketing. By the way, the only advertising agency with a guaranteed result. Just go to jekyllhydeagency.com or feel free to give us a call at 800-500-4210.